Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the PROSPEX Energy Investor Presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just please simply type in your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and will publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we will send you an email to notify you when they're ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll, and I'd be grateful if you could just respond to that, and that will clear that from your screen. And I'd now like to hand over to Edward Dawson, CEO, and Carlos Venturini, Technical Director of PROSPEX Energy. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning, and good morning, listeners. Thank you much for joining us today. We're pleased to talk you through our latest corporate presentation, and also often I do this alone, but I'm delighted that Carlos has joined us, and he's going to talk us through some of the more technical details of Spain. We've added a few extra slides in on Spain. We feel people may be interested in geology and understand a bit more why we like it so much. For those who don't follow the company, or this is the first time they've listened to a presentation, we are an AIM-listed investment company investing in the energy sector. We've got a portfolio that diversifies risk in terms of we have multiple assets, multiple jurisdictions that we work in. We are, focused on a mature market with infrastructure and available capacity. Europe, imports a lot of gas, and therefore we, expect to continue a strong market. As a team, we are highly experienced. We've been through a number of companies together. We do have a strong technical record and a technical high working standard that is appreciated by industry. We've grown several companies and taken them through full cycle. People will have noted that we've just completed on a transaction buying into the El Romeral project, which is a gas to power project in Spain. So the focus of the presentation is largely there. But we have the other primary asset, which is Selva. Selva is going to be key in transforming the company during the rest of this year. It's going to come on production once permitted, and it will generate significant cash flows for the company. So Carlos is going to talk a little bit about Spain. That is a picture from inside the power station. It's one of the gas engines. Carlos, over to you.
Here I am. Yeah, good morning again. You can see me now. Well, this map, I don't know how to start, but very quick one. I like to show and tell story. You see a series of let's say areas here in yellow. This is actually in the subsurface. It's the representation of where the gas is in subsurface. Basically is located between 500 and 600 meters depth in elongated channels under the ground. So this is how this gas appear here. And we are in this corner of Spain here somewhere. All of you have probably been in Malaga, I'm sure, and in Granada, I'm sure. Well, this mountain chain here is to the south of this area. And these rocks, these channels, were formed when the two plates, Africa and Europe, were colliding, and they were depositing sediments that created these channels, like kind of let's say deltaic fluviatile systems. The history is that the area has been explored since 1983, and at the beginning they were finding some gas here and there, the original company working there was Chevron. Eventually, they applied a technique called AVO analysis. It's a geophysical processing technique to the data, and they start seeing gas. Basically, it worked because it was shallow. And then they recorded and they processed with this technique, and they start drilling with a much higher rate of success. In what has happened today is that in the concession we have originally 5 wells went into production, and then in this case 2 wells, what we call PUD, they are undeveloped discoveries, were also highlighted. Today the plant has the area has between 11 and 13 different locations that we are ready to start drilling to extract the gas. And in this area here, where you see the third concession, Romeral 3, there is a power plant that is located and is absorbing gas to convert it into electricity from 3 wells that are El Ciervo, Santa Clara, and Sevilla 1. El Ciervo is here, so it's a long little pipe there that is in our concessions. Then you got Sevilla, Santa Clara 1, and Sevilla 1, this one here. So all this come into here, the electricity generated, and later on is sent to the grid, to the Spanish grid, and sold. The capacity of this plant is up to 50,000 meters cube a day. Now is underused because these 2-3 wells that I mentioned are old. They are going down in production. That's why we are encouraged to drill all these concessions, and this is the asset. This is the real asset of the concession. I say as a geologist more than the plant, but possibly the plant is important, but what is going to produce gas and then electricity and again revenue is these little guys down here. We got very low prospects, very low risk prospects. And when I said, I may go to the next one. When I say low risk, I mean, this is a typical representation of one of the possible wells. As you see here, this is in time, but actually we are around 400 meters in depth. This is a tank underground. This would be the position of a typical well that we would drill. And then on the right, we put this into this square just to give you an idea where we are. Imagine that this is the channel systems that I was referring to, that was created as when the 2 plates were in motion and these systems were active, and like fluviatal, deltaic, turbiditic. And this is creating this next kind of thing I'm going to show you, which is this is a seismic line. As you see here, this section here, these are the map. All these lines here are seismic sections. This is like an echography of a mom when he's waking a baby. Basically, it's the same thing. But here, what we are looking at is this geometry here. This is the volume that we are looking. This is a representation, but actually the reality is showing this. And these bright areas and darker areas represent the contrast between areas that have gas and areas that have not gas or don't have any gas. And here we are at the top of this red one. This is where the gas is. So this is the technique that allowed in after 85, 86 to Chevron to start developing that area, and eventually they drilled many wells from here to Cadiz, basically to Seville. So this is essentially what we have here. When we say that it's low risk first of all because the wells are very shallow, so we don't need to carry a rig that is expensive and is difficult and is not available. It's relatively cheap. The second reason why we say it's low risk is because the gas, or what we call the reservoir, the container of the gas, is, we would say, very noble, very resilient. It doesn't disgregate when we suck the gas at high pressure even. There is no high pressure. This is another reason why it's low risk. And essentially, many of the areas are in located, the locations of possible wells are in areas that are of low agricultural value with minimal or non occupation. So it's very relatively straightforward to arrange for land permitting, which is the rental you need to get from the farmer in order to put a well in his land. So this is the reason why we consider it very low risk. There are many locations. We are now embarked into with the government into starting the process. As Ed said, we became operators of the plant and the concessions in full mode a few days ago, weeks ago. Now we are in a position to request to the government the final bid before start drilling, which is the permits to drill. And the permits to drill require an environmental impact assessment study that we are undertaking now as we speak. Once this permit is granted, we have these concessions are concessions of production or exploitation, as the Spanish law called. And that means that you have the right inside to explore, basically, to make holes if you find accumulations or potential accumulations of gas, like this case. In that particular case now, we expect to come out with maybe 10, 12, 13 locations and file the applications for them to be approved. Maybe normally the times are around a year. As far as we know, and we follow the market very well, because of COVID and even earlier to COVID, there has not been any drilling in Spain at all. So I know someone asked whether why other people have been drilling. No, not in Spain. This is not possible. It didn't happen. We have a neighbor here in the northwest here, guys from a company called Oil and Gas Capital. We're very friends with the technical team there, and they are drilling. Eventually, they were going to drill in February before COVID, and the whole thing was stopped. They were bringing the rig from France, and it was stopped. Now, eventually, with all the authorizations given, they started probably April, May, and they will drill 3 wells here, 3. But this is different. This is an exploration area, and we have a concession area. So they had a long wait because of COVID, basically. So this is the situation now. We like them. It's a very exciting area. It has gas, very easy to produce. Most of the areas in the new locations are connected already. So when I say connected, we got, if we go back to concession, to the main slide here, there is a major pipeline that is this red line here. This is the Enagas national pipeline. This pipeline works at 70 bar of pressure. The wells are bringing gas between 40 and 50 bars. So either we have enough gas to put it there. If it has a 70, fine, we put it straight. If not, you increase the pressure with what we call a compressor, and then you inject it in. But basically, before doing that, we will get this gas through the existing pipeline, and maybe another ones with the small sections here to get it into the small pipeline, the red fine line here, to get into our power plant. So in this case, we will use up to 50,000 meter cube of gas to feed the plant. Eddie will talk about the plant later. And the remainder gas, it will go into the Enagas grid. And I think I finished here. So this is for Ed. The next one. So we're talking about the electricity production now.
Thank you, Carlos. Yeah. Again, the slide shows a picture of the plant. The transaction, we bought the project off Naturgy, which is Spain's biggest utility, and they got into this project 15 years ago. What they wanted to do, and they bought up most of the basin around Seville. They wanted to produce gas, and then once they produced gas, they were interested into gas storage. For some reason we don't know, exactly why they never went particularly far with the project. I think they got to the stage where actually they're such a big company, they were happy to trade cargoes of gas with the Russians as opposed to develop the assets that they've got for themselves. So we've been able to pick up this portfolio with a dozen or so prospects that have been very well defined, not just by us, but other leading regional geologists and geophysicists. So we are very comfortable with that. In terms of the power station at the moment, it is operating around 22% utilization. We would anticipate being able to take that back to 100% with one, if not two wells. Historic gas prices in Spain, including subsidy, have been around 70 megawatts per hour. They're currently around 60. The Spanish electricity prices have been very consistent. Whether you take a 2-year average, a 5-year average, they all surprisingly sit where they are. Obviously, like most commodity prices, electricity prices weren't great last year in Spain, but they have come back. We do see reasonable volatility in electricity prices. We are going to be a price taker. We will run the power station effectively 5 days a week. We don't particularly want to run it all the time at the weekends because weekend electricity prices tend to be lower because there's less demand. You can see the weather through the electricity prices in Spain. Obviously, there's a reasonable amount of renewables, whether that's wind or solar, and we've got on windy days, there's clearly the wind and the turbines are producing a lot. But so we have had periods of a couple of days of very low prices since the beginning of the year, but we've seen them up over 80. People may have read about there being a big cold snap in Spain in January. This is the prospects in a bit more detail. As you can see, that there were a number of probably we do have an order of what we'd like to go at. There's even, in fact, Romeral 2S, there is a drill pad ready and waiting to go. Carlos has said we have now either have in the last couple of days or will in the next couple of days submit, or Taba, I'm sorry, will submit an application, effectively EIA work to be able to do a number of these wells. In terms of drilling wells, I know that there's some interest in what the wells cost in Spain. We've looked at this in a number of ways. As a group, we've drilled or participated in 4 wells in the last few years. So we've had quotes from those drilling contractors. The key thing for us here is that they're shallow. And whilst we will have drilled a well at this sort of depth and cost us around €500,000 in Romania, if we were to bring in a rig closer than a Romanian rig, we're probably looking around after or excluding in transport cost around €1 million. So we are looking to reduce that. How can we do that? Well, because it's such a shallow depth, whilst there are no oil and gas rigs in Spain domestically, there are actually loads of drilling rigs. They drill lots of water wells. So with the right components, actually, we can get local rigs to drill wells for us. And these local rigs, because they're not drilling so deep, aren't as powerful. They don't need to be, and therefore, the costs and the day rates for it are a lot lower. So, we would hope to bring down the €1 million cost. Just again, on the sort of macro environment, Spain, as a lot of Europe, is a big importer of gas. It's quite clear that the supplies of gas, or the obvious supplies of gas coming into Europe, are going to come off, whether it be, primarily Algeria. We've also, we're on a cargo route of LNG, Trinidad and such like, again, are all heading down. Now I really want to sort of talk about Italy. This is a fundamental and very core asset, probably the key asset of the company. It was drilled in 2017 and flow tested in 2018. Selva historically, was a big gas field in the Po Valley, the heartland of domestic gas production, and effectively, Carlos can maybe talk you through, some of the flow tests and the reserve figures. Carlos?
Yeah. Well, the reason why I could say a bit of very short history why we went there is because, let's say, like in Spain, it wasn't a wonder around Europe, the reason why we went into specific places. It was based on the recognition of these shallow pockets of sand, let's say, corresponding to turbidite channels and to systems like the one we show you in the block diagram in Spain. But here the system is much bigger. We are talking about a basin. You cannot see much here, but let's say that Bologna is somewhere there, and this is the Po basin, and Milan is somewhere up in here. And this is a large basin with 5,000 wells drilled. So imagine comparing with Spain, where only not even 50 wells have been drilled in the Guadalquivir basin. Here, this is a very mature basin, but it's so complex and varied that it still has juice, as we say. And that's why we went into these partners that knew the area very well, and we knew it. We had worked before there too. And eventually, the exploration was to enter in what was considered a depleted, between brackets, field that had been left there for the purpose of gas storage, which is very common in the Po basin by Eni in the past. And that was the original Selva field. But actually, the examination of the seismic data allowed to show that there were areas where you could still have considerable gas reserves. It was deeper than in Spain, so the well cost a bit more, but eventually you can see in the right here. The difference here is that the reservoir is a number of sands, and when they combine, they can even get up to easily 200,000-300,000 meters cube a day as a production, as commingled or combined production. The case is that is again very low risk, and we would be really happy that with the new changes in the government, our contribution here, our share here is 2.4 BCF, which is you could say discrete, but it's very interesting in terms of cash flow, because there are no complications in the production of these facilities. Are only 800 meters away, And in addition to the existing pool that we are going to produce, there are a number of other areas, locations where we still have this being a concession for production. We still allowed to scope maybe a couple of other wells. So we are very hopeful with the new changes in the government in Italy. It took a long time. Now there is a more recognizing government, in a way, recognizing the efforts of the oil industry and oil and gas industry. Italy has been the gas country of Europe historically since 1946, and there is a very strong oil and gas sector. It was very strong. It was incredibly hit by the the opponents to the fuel or fossil fuels, but now this is waving out. The new government is more pro-industrial, and they recognize the economic value of the presence of gas in the country. Otherwise, they have to import it from Russia or from Algeria. Well, the Italians will have a lot of gas available in the Mediterranean, but that doesn't mean that they cannot extract this one. So we hope that this new government will, and it's our decree. I think is ready for signature, ready.
Yeah.
Approved.
Yeah, as Carlos says, it's we've gone through a number of key steps with approvals. We are currently awaiting approval of the environment minister in Italy. The subcommittee has met and approved all the historic applications and technical work for that. So it has gone to the minister for signature. As Carlos flagged, listeners probably know that the Italian government fell in January. The new government now has, I think, 8 or 7 technocrats as ministers. Importantly for us, one of those is at the environmental ministry. So in our mind, this is the last semi-political, arguably, decision. But obviously with the change of minister, we think that is going to happen it's a lot sooner. I think it's been helpful. So we go next, effectively, once the final production concession is signed by the economic, so we think it's going to take 6 months. So we can see it, as I say, we believe that there's an opportunity, well, most likely it's going to be on production this year. We know it's methane, it's 99% methane, it's above pipeline standard, and it's relatively easy to, that 800 meters / kilometer pipeline to connect. People will have seen the flow rates. There have been, both sands have flowed over 150 standard cubic meters of gas per day. The plant is being designed to handle 150,000 standard cubic meters a day. Purely for budgetary purposes, I suppose we've been working on a gross basis 100,000 standard cubic meters of gas a day. So for us, it will increase our production effectively, 4 times of what we're currently at. It will generate significant free cash and allow exploration development of the wider portfolio. I think progress here will be a catalyst for a re-rating. As I say, whether on the environmental ministry approvals, we've seen the market, uprate the stock on that or movement on that in the past, and such like. Actually, before, I just wanted to touch on the capital cost. We've always talked about, being a capital cost to get this on production, and we've told people that it's our firm belief that this will be a non-equity cost. Why do we believe that? We have a CPR. It's a key document in terms of for shareholders, but also for financiers. There's well-defined reserves in that. And obviously, the production rates are known. So in terms of if you're a banker and wanting to be knowing that you're making a secure investment, you look at a number of things. One is the capital cost up front. This is a tiny proportion of the NPV. You're looking at how long will it take me to get my money back. It's obviously slightly dependent on flow rates and prices, but in my mind, you're looking at somewhere between 3 to 6 months. And also, how much of the overall body do I have to deplete? It's 2 to 5%. So again, it's right up there in terms of lending. I'm conscious of the time, and I'm sure shareholders have lots of questions they want to answer. So, we've talked about Tesorillo in the past to quite some depth. It's a key part of the portfolio. It's a key part of our Spanish project. The team at Tarbado is relatively small, and I do believe it's taken a lot of time and effort, and if any of them are listening, it's appreciated in terms of becoming a operating company. So our focus really is on El Romeral at the moment. It's key to one, getting that, taking control, running it safely, doing all the correct stuff, and from a technical aspect, getting drilling on there. This slide highlights a number of things in my mind. On a reserve basis, there's 2.5 BCF net to the company. We've got 5 BCF of contingent resources, and then we've got nearly 500 BCF on a net perspective resources. That obviously comes from 2 areas. In Italy, we've Selva East is effectively double the size of Selva. So, we think that's a really good follow-on project for us in Italy. And we've talked through today in El Romeral. At the moment, we have 15% of Tesorillo, and we can take it up to 49%. We are unlikely to do that until we're actually drill ready. Why is that, Ed? Well, be perfectly blunt, our partner pays 85% of the costs at the moment. So why prematurely start paying half of them? But 2.5 BCF, what does that mean? You guys, know the market well, but in terms of our market cap, that's sub $1 million per BCF, which is, in my mind, completely wrong. But the 5 BCF contingent resources again demonstrates that we've got capacity fairly easily to increase the reserves, and the prospective reserves. We've got a great chance of capturing those, especially El Romeral, with the 70% geological chance of success. That's a really big chance of success in this business. You look at in the North Sea, again, a very mature part of the world, but you're going to get still only 20-25% chance of success on the prospects there. So there's a real good growth story in there. Again, just quickly, the outlook for 2021. El Romeral, we've talked about quite a lot. Drilling, production, permitting, multi-well campaigns. Tesorillo, move that forward. Selva, production permitting and facilities construction. So, yeah, reiterating what we've just said, there's lots of growth here. The key is the progression in Italy. I reiterate that we're very we think we're in a better position now. We've had the change of government. I mean, arguably the minister was in a position to sign anyway because everyone else had signed it off. So we will be moving forward on there. We've always, when we entered into these projects, not only were we looking to do something immediately, effectively with drilling wells and such like, we wanted organic growth in the portfolio. I mean, that helps on a number of levels. We don't have to increase the admin. We don't need a new country. We don't need a new local accountant and such like. So that's good. In time, we would like to transfer into an operating company. To sort of try and wrap up this section of the talk, we are a strong management team. We are, frustrated as shareholders and experienced management about where we are at in terms of share price today. It's disappointing. I know we are, as I say, shareholders, and we have, I think, participated in most investment rounds, if not all, in terms of the equity and loan notes. We want to be European focused. We think there is an opportunity as an energy company in the next 20 years to be part of that transition. It ain't going to happen overnight, even though lots of people are really pushing for it. So we can leverage off our hydrocarbons experience, but we do want to focus in terms of gas. We don't see a strong future for some of the the heavies and dirtier ends of our industry. Possibly for the very big boys, that's fine. Europe, for its frustrations, we'd like to think it is stable. It's certainly more stable than some of the African countries that we've worked in the past and had successes with that. On investment case, the market cap today, in my mind, does not represent anywhere near the true value of the company. The last raise, as I say, we think, and the purpose of that was to improve the finances of the company. I mean, perfectly blunt, but also what happens with Italy on production. The company becomes, it makes that, crosses the Rubicon from being reliant on its good shareholders and stakeholders and supporting the company to cash flow positive. We're looking at, in my mind, if we do exit at 750,000 standard cubic meters of gas sales per annum, that is 1.4 in revenue. At today's prices, I'd like to think we might still get a bit of improvement in gas prices, and we also have a big delta on daily volumes out of Italy. We could see those being up to 50% above what we're sort of budgeting on. So we go from a company consuming cash to one that has not only covering its costs, which I would say are relatively low, or low as they can be for an AIM-listed company, to one that is self-generating, got cash to move from Italy into to Spain and then get that going, etc., etc.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed, both to Edward and Carlos. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those questions submitted already today, I'd like to remind you that a copy of the presentation, along with the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your Investor Meet company dashboard. And again, we will notify you when that's ready for you to review. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company. Immediately after the presentation has ended, you will be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. And that would be most appreciated if you could allocate some time to do that. Edward, Carlos, obviously, I know you haven't had a lot of time to review the questions that have come in, but we did receive a number of pre-submitted questions. So thank you to those investors that submitted those ahead of the event. I have seen some of the questions that have come in the live event, and what I might do is try to address those because they are of a similar nature. The first question, Ed, is really around the capital raising, really. I note that you've raised £750,000 from existing shareholders and that there are warrants attached to these new share issues. As a very long-term shareholder and showing a large paper loss, why could you not offer me the same opportunity to participate in this fundraising? Another question really around the level of the fundraising, an elephant in the room, the fundraising this week, you clearly need the money, but 1.5p. And then we had a question submitted by Adrian S. During the live presentation asking, will existing investors be able to participate in the placing on the same terms moving forward, perhaps open offers or something like that? So I know I've put three questions into one, but if I could hand over to you, Ed, to expand on that.
Yeah. It's difficult. Well, let's address. I suspect. I mean, some of these questions are relevant to probably 90% of AIM companies. One is access to its shareholders from a company's perspective. The vast majority of our shareholders are held by nominees, so we don't actually see the underlying shareholders. We see them when they make themselves aware to us, but also, so structurally, our contact with private individuals is through their brokers. So, and brokers will, either the company's brokers will, there will be a dialogue between the company and the broker about the fundraising and such like. So open offers and rights issues are historically an expensive way of doing it, and actually an unknown way of doing fundraising. There is a and I think it is good for the company generally, an assurance that the broker, yes, this is the sum's committed, and it arrives. So I would encourage individual shareholders, if they are not clients of our brokers, maybe that's a way to consider it. We have looked at other things. Let me address the price. I know that's a disappointment, and obviously that does, the price being what it is doesn't help dilution. As we know, the board are, our shareholders ourselves, so it is equally painful to us all. But the benefit to the company is on a sounder footing, and as I say, with a fair wind and Italy coming on production, we do think effectively that's the last fundraise. Will be the last fundraise, on a sort of we need to fundraise basis. And so the market's attitude will change. Historically, we have been able to, with support of shareholders, issue new shares either very close to market or a small discount. We quite hard. We were encouraging our brokers to obviously do it at a higher price. There was a number of conversations, but ultimately that is where the market or the order book was at. So that's why it's at 1.5p.
Thank you very much indeed, Ed. Just moving on to Selva. Why has Selva been so delayed, 2 years behind the schedule currently?
We've clearly, generally speaking, I'll make a comment about COVID. I think that's, I'll do a general comment about that, and then we can talk about specifics, because I think COVID comes into some of these answers all over the place. We work in a well-regulated industry with numerous parties who have an interest, or stakeholders. We are reliant on government licenses to explore and exploit. Obviously, everyone is aware of the pandemic. There has certainly, in my mind, been some delays due to that. I can't quantify those. But in fact, we've continued to have physical access to the well site in Italy. And we have installed during the pandemic environmental monitoring equipment and such like. The various ministries who we interact with, or the operators interact with more specifically, have continued to operate. Staff have worked from home and such like. We've not had the service, I don't think, to the same level, but over time people have found out the home phone numbers or the mobile phone numbers of these people, and they have by and large continue to be supporters of the projects, and we are thankful for that. In terms of other delays in Italy, again, it is a long progress. I suspect, I'm not quite convinced we're 2 years behind schedule. We would certainly like to have been a lot quicker than that. Possibly some naivety in terms of ourselves and a couple of other junior partners, and sort of expectations of being able to deliver stuff. As shareholders know, we had an interest in Romania, and that was permitted. And we were probably, I couldn't find at the time a company that had drilled an exploration well, got on production as quick as that. So maybe that's set some false expectations. I do believe we're very close, though.
Thank you very much indeed, Ed. Obviously, there was, as you say, a number of questions about COVID, and I think Carlos talked about the fact that no one had drilled during that time. There is a question that was following on regarding Selva, likewise in El Romeral, where we were told on Christmas Eve that it would take a week to complete the deal, but it was the 28th of Feb before it was finalized. How did it take 10 weeks when it was only meant to take 1?
I think when on Christmas Eve, we put an announcement. It's a fair question in broad sense. I think we did say it would be the end of January, and it turned into the end of February. Again, I don't particularly want to get into specifics of it. We were waiting. This transaction has actually been a year in the making, or completion has. We were waiting on the formal letter of a government agency who had faxed us that, but pre-Christmas. My apologies. So that's the frustration of dealing with government agencies, I suppose. Yeah.
Just moving on to El Romeral, what is the likely cost to drill additional prospects? And at its current market capitalization, can PROSPEX afford these costs?
So we've talked about in the talk what we think we can. We've had a series of costings. So I think we're looking around headlines. We can see it at $1 million per well. However, if you consider what we've drilled similar depth wells for in Europe, so the same regulatory environment to a certain extent, we've been able to half that cost. So, the team are looking at that. In terms of will we be able to participate, I firmly believe so. As I said, the important thing for us, the next stage, is the cash generated in Italy. And, these are, low risk, low cost wells that we should be drilling. We'll find a way.
And there was one just final question attached to that, is what revenue can PROSPEX expect to receive from El Romeral come the end of 21?
Okay. I think PROSPEX can expect to receive, I think Taba will generate somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000 at current electricity prices for the year. In terms of PROSPEX receiving it, I suspect the funds will stay down in Taba because we're moving that project along. So I don't have in my budget any money coming from El Romeral to PROSPEX, but Taba will use that to progress the project there, I think.
Thank you. Obviously, just mindful of time, we've got about 8 minutes until the hour, so there's a couple more pre-submitted questions, but I think we've finished with the one that the CEO of PROSPEX often mentions, that the stock trades at substantial discount to market valuations. And of course, we've touched on the share price. But with that in mind, how does PROSPEX intend to deliver on its promises to create shareholder value?
So, can you say the question again?
Yes, of course. The CEO often mentions that PROSPEX trades at a substantial discount to market valuations. With that in mind, how does PROSPEX intend to deliver on its promises to create shareholder value?
By delivering on the ground, I think ultimately, because of the delivery on the ground and the cash flows, that will demonstrate, and the market will re-rate the company. Okay, it's deliverance, and that's why we have to get it on production, and that's why it will get on production.
Perfect, thank you. Ed, Carlos, can I just ask you just to click on the Q&A tab? It's on the right-hand side of the slides in front of you. The first question there, if I could ask you to start at the top and I'll follow you down to the bottom, just obviously where it's appropriate. If I could ask you to read out the question, perhaps who it's from, and if you could give a response, that'd be great. I'll pick it up from you at the end, and then obviously we'll divert investors for feedback. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I refer the first one looks like by certain John R. regarding Italy, I would say, Ed?
I don't quite understand the question. The question says, why don't you install a larger diameter flow line pipe to pre-invest for exploration opportunities in the
I think it may have been regarding the Italy case, when I was showing in the concessions that there were other areas where we could drill. The answer to that is that every well has to pass through a number of regulatory bodies, inspections and reviews, and there is an engineering case that has to be filed in the government at different provincial instances and at national industry instances, and each one is different. So you could eventually make a bigger, a larger, let's say, thicker diameter well, but it's not economic because you are targeting a particular kind of level of production from a known reservoir that we know from the seismic and from the other studies. So normally you do one by one. Also, once you make a discovery that is commercial and the state declares that you can produce it, like the case we have now in Italy, another discovery beside will require its own connection to the flow, to the major flow gas line or to the processing plant. So you actually cannot do this. You go more or less one by one, I'm afraid. I don't know if I answered that properly.
Maybe John R will pop up again. Who knows? Charlie C, the presentation is useful. Will PROSPEX commit to further Q&A updates over the course of the year to update on progress? We are looking at platforms to increase dialogue. I think this has been useful today. I've certainly been happy to do it, and I think we'll continue to find useful dialogue methods. Simon C, thanks for the update. What do you view as the greatest to the business moving forward? Not quite to the greatest. I fill in the blank myself. Charlie, for me, it's fundamental. Progress in Italy. That's the key. The three targets for me.
Edward, sorry to cut across. I think someone's just putting great risk was the missing word that you were looking for. It just come in at the bottom.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. But I'd like to think we've sort of, managed the risk now on a lot of fronts. I suppose geological. Let's look at the classic risks. Geological risk. No, that's all been de-risked in Italy and in Spain. In terms of financing, our capital contribution to Italy is relatively small, and I've talked about how we think that could be covered by non-equity financing. Timing is obviously is a risk. I would say that is improving at the moment as opposed to going the other way. So yeah, I think those are the key ones. Environmental risk and general awareness. I think we've still got there's an underlying understanding that the world does need some energy from hydrocarbons, and we're in the right place to do it.
Yeah, if I may add something, Ed and Mark, on the risk notion of risk to shareholders. From the point of view of I've been in energy for the last 35 years, more or less. My take now, and I survived a number of oil and gas crises through my career. This is probably the third or the fourth. The one was leaving college, and then successive ones. We are now in presence of reaccommodation of the energy balance. If you look at the large companies like maybe Shell or this kind of thing, they have been consistently in decreasing reserves of oil with very, very low expectations each year. And now, for instance, companies like Shell, who used to have 20 years of reserves up in a store, now they got less than 6 or 6. There is a turmoil into the oil sector, but still oil will be needed for pharmaceutical, for industrial uses. But gas is a particularly, let's say, commodity or source of energy, particularly methane, because everyone from the political, decarbonization impulse that all the politicians are following in Europe, it is true. They have to recognize that anyway these countries are importing most of their energy, and how they import it? They import it through LNG tankers that come to LNG plants, and they they compress the gas and they sell the gas. The gas comes from Algeria, from Russia, from the Mediterranean, wherever. With the position in which we are in our 2 concessions in Italy and in Spain, and the gathering of information that we do around with our networks in both countries, although there is a resistance to these fossil fuels, there is still the recognition that gas, methane, will be necessary for another 30 years. The reason being, specifically, that any politician or any green supporter can go and say, we want photovoltaic, we want more hydropower, we want more geothermal, whatever. But the reality is that these sources like wind power and hydropower and photovoltaic are, they are subject to harmonics variations. And these harmonics, which is seasonal or daily, have to be filled in an energy mix. And the energy mix is stabilized by the presence of methane. So gas today in Europe is a very, let's say, sought after source of energy and will be, in our opinion, for another 30 years. Let's wait until hydrogen comes, but still in Spain, there are 2 stations where people can look at hydrogen, but not even load a car. So, you can talk about a lot about other sources of energy. We are all going for renewable, but gas is still one of the best options to a transition from a fuel economy into a green economy. We still need gas. So that's about risk. So for me, it means low risk. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Carlos. Sorry, Ed, I was just going to jump in just to say, obviously, there's a few more questions that have come in. I think some are of a similar nature that you may have addressed. I don't know if there's perhaps a 1 or 2 more, if there are any that you can take. And then obviously, I'll then look to perhaps wrap up, ask you for a few closing comments, and then redirect investors for feedback.
Yeah. Charlie C, what are your views on ESG potential, e.g. drilling wells for future carbon storage? Charlie, in terms of, well, first of all, we've got to deplete the methane from the reservoirs that we've got. So for us, carbon storage is some way down the track. In fact, there is, Spain does have a history of using depleted gas reservoirs for storing gas. But in fact, they're not a fan of it. You also, in my mind, you probably want larger reservoirs than what we've got. You probably want one large reservoir as opposed to a number of smaller reservoirs, just from the physics of flowing gas in and out of these things. Obviously, if you're storing CO2, then effectively, I suppose you're only pushing it one way. It's an option. We are some time away from that because we want to get the gas out first. A couple more questions again, talking about access for small shareholders and participating in placings. We are conscious of it. Accessing and giving people access to it it's difficult. I think it's a whole market thing as opposed to ourselves. So there is a platform that we have looked at in the past. I don't know quite how well that's still going, and we will continue to look at these things. Thank you.
Ed, Carlos, thank you very, very much indeed today. And thank you to all the investors that both submitted questions ahead of the event and during the event. Perhaps, Ed, just before we redirect investors to provide feedback, which I know is important to the company, perhaps I could just ask you just for a few closing comments and then I will end the session.
Thank you. Well, I hope people appreciate the time. they've had access with us today, and we wanted to give it to shareholders and prospective shareholders. In terms of, I think, key takeaways, we would encourage people to look at this as, in their own mind, a value play, and where there's some good starters. Look at that. Obviously we trade significantly below book value. There is a good piece of research written by Barney Gray that goes into great depth about Italian and Spanish assets. Effectively, post the fundraise, I think he would adjust his numbers on just simple mathematics basis to valuing Italy alone at 3p, Spain, El Romeral at 3p, so obviously multiples of the market cap. So that is a good reminder of value in my mind of the company. And for those more technically minded, look at the CPRs. And then, I think listeners probably will know the market better than us. But again, key trigger points for us are permitting approval from the Environmental Ministry in Italy. That is a key thing, and we think that will happen soon, such that we can get gas on production by the year end. And again, that transforms the company. We are not only self-sustaining, we're self-sustaining with an opportunity to continue to expand and develop the portfolio.
Ed, Carlos, thank you very, very much indeed for your time for today and for updating investors. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you access this meeting from the website, the feedback page will appear. But if you access the meeting via the link sent to you by email, you'll simply be asked to log back in to submit your feedback. And if you could, I think that'd be greatly received by the company. On behalf of the management team of Prospect Energy, I'd like to thank you for attending today's session. That now concludes today's presentation. Good morning to you all.
Thank you.